We also learned moments ago here that Egypt's president has now said he will not visit the White House if the Gaza relocation plan is on the agenda. The Times of Israel reporting a short time ago that President al-Sisi will not travel to Washington if the discussion does involve President Trump's plan for the U.S. to quote-unquote own Gaza and prevent Palestinians from returning. President Trump extended an invitation to the president earlier this month, but no date had been announced just yet. I do want to bring you, of course, to this image right here, but also over to the shot of the White House. As we know, just yesterday, President Trump met with Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House and predicted the possible end to a very fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Over the past couple days, Hamas has said that it plans to delay the release of 3 more hostages, claiming Israel has violated the terms of the ceasefire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directing his troops to prepare to resume fighting. Now, if those hostages are not released, he did warn of a deadline at noon on Saturday. President Trump echoing Netanyahu's warning, even telling Israel to call for the release of even more hostages. As always, so much to discuss out of that region. So I do want to bring in a good friend of the show here. We have Dan Arbell, scholar in residence at American University's Center for Israel Studies, also a 25-year veteran of the Israeli force there. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to join us here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, first off here, I do want to talk about the warnings that have been issued by President Trump here in the U.S., as well as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I want to get your take as an expert. Overall, does Hamas, does the terror group there really care about those threats or warnings?
Well, I think that the Hamas issued its ultimatum or its announcement that it will suspend the implementation of the deal and releasing more hostages earlier in the week, and that left some time to try and negotiate a resolution of this issue. But I think that Hamas is certainly concerned about threats by Trump and by Netanyahu. I'm not sure, though, whether that'll bring them to change their mind. I think that they're still pretty much in control of Gaza. They still hold the hostages, which are definitely the key. That's what their main bargaining chip, so to speak. So it's hard to see them succumbing to pressure. However, I think that they are pretty much under pressure and thinking about how to go about dealing with this and what to do ahead of Saturday's deadline at noon.
And as I mentioned, what you're looking at right there is a live image coming in out of Gaza. And we actually saw some of those humanitarian aid trucks coming in. And also want to get your take on this, because the United Nations, who has not always been the biggest fan or supporter of Israel, has even said that the amount of humanitarian aid since the ceasefire began has increased. And we know that one of Hamas's arguments there about Israel violating the ceasefire is that the aid is not reaching them. So essentially, what does it say that even the United Nations is agreeing that the amount of aid has increased?
It means that Israel is keeping its end of the deal at this point, and it's certainly, almost 600 trucks per day are going into Gaza. And I think that this is part of the deal that Israel agreed to, and it's delivering on. The question is, this aid, the concerns over this aid is where does it go? And does Hamas seize it all, or do the people of Gaza that are suffering actually getting it? And that's the concern. But yet, despite these concerns, Israel has been delivering on its end. And I think that, that shows that it is implementing the deal in return for getting the hostages back. So we have to see how that plays out as well.
One thing that's been making headlines, just last week, we heard from President Trump that the U.S. should, quote unquote, own Gaza here as the war does kind of wrap up. So my question for you overall, do we know how Netanyahu feels about that? And also, have we heard from the leader of the Palestinian Authority about how he feels about that plan?
So I think that Netanyahu was kind of surprised by, not by the actual raising of this issue by Trump, but by the specificity that Trump and the Trump read from a paper with a whole detailed plan. And so I think that Israel was surprised at first, but I think Netanyahu very quickly kind of decided, said it's a great idea and it should be looked into. And I think that he's now an enthusiastic supporter, but it does not seem something that is, first of all, no one's sure it's feasible. No one's sure when it will actually be rolled out, and what it means for Israel in terms of having hundreds of thousands of residents of Gaza leave. Neighboring countries have rejected it. And so this whole plan is up in the air, yet Netanyahu is showing support for it as part of his efforts to consolidate, a united front with the U.S. president.
Discussing the IDF and the U.S. and Israel in general here, I want to go a little bit more into what's happening over in Lebanon, because the U.S. has essentially denied the request by Israel and the IDF to keep those troops there just a little bit longer as the fighting does continue. So what does that say overall about the fact that the U.S. Does not want the IDF troops to remain there in Lebanon even longer?
So the U.S. wants Israel to implement its end of the deal with the Lebanese government. Israel, however, is very concerned that leaving Lebanon would open up, would allow Hezbollah to rearm, regroup, reorganize. And that's why Israel insists for the time being to hold maintain presence along the border at different points, as it feels that the Lebanese army that was supposed to be deployed in areas of southern Lebanon and prevent Hezbollah from reorganizing has not been deployed effectively and is not doing its job. So Israeli concerns are security concerns. The U.S. wants Israel to keep its end of the bargain with the Lebanese government. We'll see how that fares out. It's not clear whether this is just an initial U.S. reaction or whether the U.S. will consider its position in the coming days. But if it doesn't, then Israel will have to see how it actually withdraws, yet maintain some sort of effective presence along the border from the Israeli side, though.
All right. Dan Arbell, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break it all down. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. And I do want to take you out to another developing story that we are following internationally right now, is after the rescue of American hostage Mark Fogel from Russia Tuesday, another hostage is expected to be released later today, but details are being kept under wraps. Now, just hours ago, the special envoy for hostages, Adam Boehler, told Fox News, quote, "We expect another one Wednesday," referring to another American hostage elsewhere. However, Boehler added, quote, "I can't release until the person released. Obviously, it could endanger a hostage release, and that I cannot do." You see that quote right there on your screen. Boehler making the statement as he and Secretary of State Marco Rubio joined Sean Hannity over the phone there on Fox News again hours ago. And we are waiting on more information there on who that will be. We'll, of course, keep you posted as we find out more. Also want to pop this up for you right here on your screen, as this is a post on social media from the White House showing last night's return of Mark Fogel. The American history teacher was deemed wrongfully detained by Russia after his arrest in August 2021, and he was serving a 14-year prison sentence. The White House described his rescue as a diplomatic thaw that could advance negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. President Trump would not say if he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin about Fogel, but Fogel praised the Russian leader, describing him as, quote, "very generous and statesmanlike in granting me a pardon." President Trump was asked about the terms of the deal, saying, quote, "very fair, very, very fair, very reasonable. Not like deals you've seen over the years. They were very fair." And this morning, a Kremlin spokesperson telling reporters that a Russian citizen was freed in the U.S. in exchange for Fogel's release, but refused to identify the person until he or she arrives back in Russia, quote, in the coming days. Again, looking at a post there from the White House as Fogel did return and then met over with President Trump. We did bring you those comments live last night, and we'll bring you more of them later on today if there are additional comments. It is likely, as the press briefing with the White House, Caroline Leavitt, begins at 1 p.m. Eastern time today, that will be a topic that is discussed. We do have to head to a quick 2-minute commercial break, but a lot more news coming up here in just a few.